This broadcast comes from Ramsgate, where many hundreds of Jewish people have assembled to commemorate the yahrzeit of Sir Moses Montefiore. As part of the commemoration, Dr. Abraham Levy, OBE, addressed the assembly in Moses Montefiore Synagogue, followed by His Excellency, the Israeli Ambassador, who spoke about the life of Moses Montefiore, including his love of the land of Israel. And finally, the assembly was shown a very interesting document.
I'd like to welcome you all to the synagogue of Sir Moses Montefiore, and his Nahala, or rather his yahrzeit, as most of you will be referring to it, was actually yesterday. So we come today to make a hashkava, memorial prayer for him and his wife. And many people, especially Hasidim, come over because they think this is a place where you can say tefillot for him to intercede on their behalf with the Almighty to bring an answer to their prayers. So what I want to do, and I've done this for the last few years, is to just mention a few highlights of the life of Sir Moses Montefiore. And it is a very special and moving occasion for me to do this particular year, because we have the privilege and pleasure to have with us His Excellency the Israeli Ambassador to the Court of St. James. And Sir Moses Montefiore had so much to do with Yerushalayim, having visited it on no less than 7 occasions, that I feel it's a very moving occasion when, I believe for the first time ever, an Israeli ambassador of this country has entered his synagogue here in Ramsgate. But I want to tell you, I often repeat how he was a man who managed to synthesize, to put together his love of Judaism and his love for being proud of being British and an Englishman. And there are many examples that I give, which some of you may have heard, and we won't have time to go over them together, but there was one particular one which highlights his attitude to loyalty to his God and loyalty to his Queen. And that was that any of you who've been to Richmond Park in London, it's full of deer. And once a year, the Queen, I'm not sure whether she still does it, the Queen would ask for a number of these deer to be killed and the side of venison to be sent to some of her friends. And when Sir Moses Montefiore was the sheriff of the City of London, he knew that the Queen Victoria, was going to send him a side of venison. And he wanted so much to receive this present without offending his God. So he goes to Bevis Mark Synagogue, the synagogue where he worshipped, and he said, send the shochet to Richmond Park, and when it comes to the deer that I am going to get from Queen Victoria, it will be slaughtered according to the laws of Shechita, so that when the gift comes to me from Queen Victoria, I will be able to eat it according to the law that God has commanded me, and at the same time honoring the Queen who gave me this special present. And like this we can find many other examples. But what is most remarkable is here was a man who at the age of 91 went to Israel on his 7th visit in order to see what more he could do for the Jewish people. And not only did he do that, but he then published a book, an open letter addressed to Sir Moses Montefiore Baronet by 2 very great rabbis. And the letters are actually contained in this book in Hebrew, which refers to Moshe Montefiore in incredible terms. It was Morenu Harav Meir Orbach and Morenu Harav Shemuel Salant, who was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. And here they go and they treat him like a king. And they tell him there are bad rumors going around in London that we in Israel don't want to work, just want to live from the charity which we receive from all over the world. And we want to show you that we care for work. We believe that you've got to live by the sweat of your brow. And we want to tell you all that we are doing here to develop the country. And then we know, for example, how at that time he was having all sorts of arrangements to see what more he could do for them. He built the famous windmill to produce bread, and now it's being repaired so that bread can be produced there again. He bought land for the development of cotton. He bought land for vineyards, for all sorts of fruits. In this last visit, he was offered a whole Arab village that he was going to buy to inhabit Jews there and work there. And that was the sort of man who gave his life for the benefit of his people. But what he wanted most of all was the unity of the Jewish people. And hence, we know, for example, that in 1777, this was before he started going to Israel, the first Hasidim started to arrive in Sfat, and they had nowhere to go to worship. And the Sephardim in Sfat said, no, come to our synagogue and share it with us. And then when they were more and more, these Hasidim coming, they went to Tiberia. And they built synagogues there, the Hasidim. And Tiberia, of course, one of the holy cities of Israel. And in fact, the famous Sephardi, the Duke of Naxos, had arranged with the Ottoman Empire to build Tiberias as an independent state of the Jewish people, anticipating Theodor Herzl by many, many years. And then the Perushim started to come, the pupils of the Vilna Gaon, and they settled there in 1797. The pupils of Shner Salman of Ladi, the Chabad, started to come. And every time when Sir Moses went there, all he wanted was, yes, I will work and help everybody, provided the people in Israel are united to serve their God and rebuild their country. And this is what he did, but because he realized of the importance of getting on with everybody, including non-Jews, when he would sit, as we have actual pictures of him on a tent at the heat of summer with his wife from morning to evening, to give a coin, a valuable coin, to everybody who came to ask for it. And there would be queues, and he would be there for 12, 13 or 14 hours. He did not distinguish between Sephardim and Ashkenazim and Hasidim and Perushim. He didn't even distinguish between Muslims and Christians, and if they were needing, he would also give them money. For he felt that it is only when we had a united people that the Jewish people would be able to work and survive there. Some of you may have seen the advert for this meeting in the Hamodia. Did anybody see it? Yeah. Well, very often when you see a picture of Sir Moses Montefiore, you see him with a very big kippah and he has a beard, and we perceive him, if not as a rabbi, as a rabbinic figure. But he was not that. He was a pious man. He was a religious man, but he also would dress up like the captain of the English army to go to Damascus and say, you've got to save the Jews who are you accusing that they have killed a Christian to use their blood to make wine and matzot for Pesach. And when he went there, he didn't go looking like a rabbi. He looked like a general in their eyes. And there he's holding an actual firman, an actual document where he gets from the Sultan there an admission that these men are innocent and the Jewish people can live in safety in their land. That was the man that we are honoring today. And one of the interesting things was that he became very friendly with Queen Victoria. And I'll tell you why. His house was about 7 or 8 minutes away from here, overlooking the sea. And it was the nicest house in Ramsgate. But the house next door to him, also a nice house, was that of the Duchess of Kent, who was the mother of the then Princess Victoria. And Sir Moses' garden was nicer than that of the Duchess of Kent, so he made a hole in the wall between the gardens. He made the door there, and he made a gold key, and he gave it to Princess Victoria to use his garden when she wanted to relax. And when she became queen, she never forgot this. She never forgot this. And we had a very interesting service here just over a month ago, which was attended by the Lord Lieutenant of Kent, who is the representative of the Queen in Kent, and by about 8 mayors of the area of Ramsgate, the mayors of Sandwich and other places. And it was very special that the mayor of Ramsgate came here because, as I'm going to tell you, Sir Moses Montefiore gave a very special gift to Ramsgate on his 100th year. And this is what I said in their presence, which will connect with the story I want to tell you. Ramsgate had undergone a complete transformation. Almost every street was a mass of color. The ships in the harbor were dressed in honor of the event. Even the boatmen joined the festive throng, admiring the profusion of flags and banners upon arches of evergreen. The houses were gay with buntings, kept in constant motion by the wind. And we could have thought that that was what was going on in England when we celebrated the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth only a few months ago. In fact, that was a newspaper cutting from Ramsgate in 1884 on the occasion of Sir Moses Montefiore's 100th birthday. The first mayor of Ramsgate started as mayor on his 100th birthday. And they went to Sir Moses to his house, he was an old man then, to celebrate his 100th birthday. And I want to share with you how Sir Moses celebrated his 100th birthday. First of all, he ordered that coal should be sent to every home of every poor person in Ramsgate so that they would have coal for the winter. Next, he ordered that 100 blankets commemorating 100 years of his life with the motto, "Think and Thank," should be given to the needy in Ramsgate. And then, and look at this mixture, a rabbi from Vilna who had already written for Sir Moses over 20 Sepharim in the most beautiful writing, came with one of those Sepharim for him to complete on his 100th birthday. And when he completed his Sepharim, and we have them all, he didn't write the last 3 words, Le'enei kol Yisrael. He wrote the last 4 words. Why? Moshe Le'enei kol Yisrael. He wanted to write his name as one of the last words in the Torah. So can you see the mixture? And then the vicar of Ramsgate comes and reads an address of loyalty to Sir Moses. And then what does Sir Moses do? He gives a present to the new Lord Mayor, his new chain of office. And here he is when he came last month wearing the chain of office of Sir Moses. But as I will pass this around, it's a special chain. It is made of the letter Mem, Moshe Montefiore, all over in real gold. I'll pass those around so that you can see it. So can you see how he tried in one and the same action to show his loyalty to his God and his loyalty to the country in which he was living? And that is a celebration. Now, on that occasion, I told a rather interesting story that occurred to me about 3 or 4 months ago. I was honored to be invited to have lunch in Buckingham Palace with 8 other people. In fact, it was in the same room where His Excellency the Ambassador presented his credentials at Buckingham Palace. A small dining room. They brought in shomerim and they made kasher, the silver for me. I was the only Jew there. We were talking, and I told the Queen about the gold key that Sir Moses had made for Queen Victoria. And the first thing she said was, I wonder whether we can still find that key. So when the Lord Lieutenant came here a month ago, as representing the Queen, I asked him to write to Buckingham Palace to report this conversation we had, and then see if we can find the key and make a replica for the city of Ramsgate to have and be proud of. So that is the sort of thing that we have been trying to show the world as to why this man was unique. And I have an ambition now to do this in Jerusalem. Because remember, when Sir Moses Montefiore went to Jerusalem, who cared for Yerushalayim? They were living in squalor, the Jews and the Muslims and everything. And here was a genius of a man who said, Yerushalayim, I'm proud of it. I put it at the top of my coat of arms. Can you see over there? Yerushalayim at the top, to show that he's proud of his coat of arms that the Queen gave him, and proud of Yerushalayim. And I want to show that Moshe Montefiore was loved by everybody in Yerushalayim. The greatest rabbis and the greatest Chilonim, they followed him because they saw only goodness in him. And in that way, we should try and bring a little bit of shalom between the different people that sadly are arguing about what God, they think, said to them, instead of arguing of how we can work together to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So just with those few words, I want to welcome officially the Israeli ambassador. And you know, he's a very humble man. I had planned that he should sit in the seat of Sir Moses Montefiore. I had, please, I don't know why I can still persuade him. And I'll tell you why. A few years ago, one year when Weizmann came on a state visit, how long ago? 12 years ago? About 12 years ago, President Weizmann came on a state visit to England. And he came to Bevis Marks. And we sat him in the seat of Sir Moses at Bevis Marks. And I said that here he was sitting on the seat of the man who was the first man to realize the practicality of reviving Yerushalayim. And I said, Sir Moses no doubt is looking over us today, and he's smiling as the President of Israel is sitting on his seat, and he's telling us all, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so. And I think he's looking over us today that the first Israeli ambassador has come and sat next to his chair, to be able to say, here is an ambassador to the court of St. James from the country that I helped to build. So with those words, I hand you over to His Excellency, the Israeli ambassador, to say a few words to us today.
Rabbi Levi, Rabbanim, Morai, Rabbotai, friends. You know, nearly 100 years ago, according to his family, Moses Montefiore had a dream that changed his life. You know, at the time he was 43. He was already extremely wealthy. He was very, very active in Jewish life. If you read his diary, you would see that every day he was kovea itim la Torah. He would make time to study. He was a gabbai of Bevis Mark Synagogue. He was on the Chevra Kadisha. He looked after the departed. He was already active as a leader in the Jewish world. We know that he later would travel to Damascus, as we heard from Rabbi Levi, to protect the Jews against the blood libel. He traveled to Italy to try and rescue a young Jewish boy who had been baptized and stolen off into the Vatican. He tried to save Jews from persecution in Romania, in Morocco, in Russia, and all over the world. But this dream changed his life, he said, because he dreamt that he saw Eliyahu Hanavi. He knew it was Eliyahu Hanavi, and Eliyahu Hanavi said to him just two words. He said, Koneh Hakol. Koneh Hakol, the possessor of all. Basically meaning what you have is not yours, it belongs to someone else. And in fact, Moses Montefiore made a ring on which he had engraved the words Koneh Hakol, and he wore it for the rest of his life. And Eliyahu Hanavi pointed. And he pointed to Yerushalayim. And that was the dream that set Moshe Montefiore on his journey to Eretz Yisrael. And it wasn't an easy journey. In those days, not just in his last journey, his seventh journey when he was in his 90s, even his first journey when he was in his 40s, it was a treacherous thing. Not just because of pirates, but because of wars that were going on in the Middle East at the time. And because of the storms. And in fact, in his diary, we know that during that journey there was a terrible storm. And he and his wife thought that they were going to lose their lives. And he had with him a piece of afikoman, the special matzah from Seder night, that he knew was a special skula. And during the storm, he took a piece of this afikoman and threw it into the sea. And incredibly, the sea became calm. And to this day, in the Montefiore and Sebag Montefiore families on Seder night, when it comes to the time to eat afikoman, they read the page of this diary, which talks about the miraculous saving of Moses Montefiore and Judith Montefiore by throwing the afikoman into the sea. So amazing, amazing stories. So he came to Yerushalayim, and as we heard from Rabbi Levi, he made it his goal to help the Jews begin to establish themselves in Yerushalayim and in the land of Israel. And I think broadly there were three goals that he set for himself when he went there. The first was to help learning, to help Torah study in Israel. He gave to every institution that asked him. Secondly was to ensure the health of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael. He set up medical facilities and hospitals. And thirdly was to ensure the parnassah of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael by establishing a windmill, by cotton fields, by weaving factories and so on. And you know, I cannot help thinking what Moses Montefiore would think if he was able to make that journey today. If he was able to see the learning, the Torah study that is taking place in Eretz Yisrael. Today, I know in Jerusalem, they are celebrating Siyum Hashas of Daf Yomi, with tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people educated in those institutions who have been learning for 7 years, will carry on for the next 7 years. The hospitals, could he have imagined that Israel would become a medical center, not just for itself, but to have ill people from the whole of the Middle East sending their children who are ill to our hospitals in order to be cured with treatments that are not available? Could he have imagined the medical cooperation between hospitals in Israel and hospitals here in the United Kingdom? Could he have imagined that the vast majority of medicines that are taken throughout the world are actually manufactured in Israel? And in terms of parnassah, could he have imagined that at a time when so much of the world is in depression and recession, Israel through the ingenuity of its young people, of its immigrants, would come up with an economy that was flourishing, that was inventing, that was innovating, that was so resilient. To me, it's an amazing, amazing thought. You know, the yahrzeit of Moses Montefiore is on Yud Gimel Av, which means that the closest parsha to his yahrzeit is always Va'etchanan, which we read yesterday. Va'etchanan, that terribly, terribly moving prayer by Moses that he should be allowed to cross over the River Jordan and go into the land of Israel. Incredibly something that every single one of us can do today that was not allowed to Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu to do. But how does Moses frame his prayer? He says, Ebra na el hayarden ve'ereh et ha'aretz hatova. Let me cross over the Jordan and let me see the good land. And the Kotzker Rebbe asks, why does he say the good land? Why doesn't he just say, let me cross over and see the land? That's what he wants to see. And he says, no, his prayer was that when he crossed over, he should only be able to see what was good about the land of Israel. And that is exactly what Moses Montefiore did. He crossed over, he saw the land, he saw what was good about it, and more importantly, he saw the potential. He saw the potential and he worked to help fulfill that potential. May we all be zocher, where we all merit to continue in his tradition, to see the good of the land and to help fulfill its potential. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Rabbi Levi. This is going to be very brief, but I'll tell you about one item from my collection which I think illustrates an enormous amount about Sir Moses and his connection with Yiddishkeit and with Ramsgate. Very often you get offered Montefiore items in auctions or through Jewish dealers, but occasionally something appears in Kent, in a non-Jewish place that has some connection with Montefiore. And so I was intrigued a few years ago to read in a catalogue of a non-Jewish auction house the statement that they had something which they referred to as contract for almshouses at Ramsgate. So it says that Montefiore had Eastcliff Lodge, now demolished, Montefiore Synagogue, which we're privileged to be in, and the mausoleum next door. But as far as we can establish, these almshouses were never built. So I thought, all right, I'll bid for this and we'll see what it is. So I bid for it. It went for well over the estimate, because at least one other person must have known that it had some connection with Montefiore. And then I got it. This arrived. Contract for almshouses at Ramsgate for Sir Moses Montefiore, Baronet. And you open it up, and inside are a few documents, an indenture between Sir Moses and Thomas Elgar, the builder. Sir Moses Montefiore Bart and Mr. Thomas Elgar. Contract for the erection of almshouses. Now we get a little bit of a clue. Museum and library at Ramsgate, Kent. And then comes specification of the works to be done, completing 10 dwelling houses, a museum and reading room at Ramsgate. And at the back are the plans which the builder was supposed to build to. And I'm going to try and unfold the plan for you. And there's the plan. And when I saw this plan, I thought somehow this looks... Yes, why don't we open it fully? If we hold it up, you see here a central house, a central building, and then on each side 5 more buildings. I've never had, I must say, an ambassador as an assistant before, but I'm privileged to do this. And I looked at this and I had in my collection this postcard. And this is a postcard, perhaps if you want to see later, you'll see that these are the plans of Judith Montefiore College. The college which Sir Moses did build in Ramsgate. It's not that he didn't build them. He did build this in Ramsgate. He built here a yeshiva in which there was learning in a Jewish yeshiva, which existed here for over nearly 100 years before it was moved to London. And there, in fact, I have in my collection various Gemaras from a Shas, which are stamped with the Judith Montefiore College stamp from the 1860s. So he ordered a Shas, and he had here various elderly men, Rabbonim from Eastern Europe, who he brought here, who lived their last years in these houses that he built for them and learnt in the yeshiva. So we see from this that what we're in today is only a small part of what there was here. There was a magnificent house which he lived in, and indeed there was a yeshiva here as well. So I think we're very privileged to be here with the ambassador, and I think we're privileged that Rabbi Levy has done so much to keep the memory of Sir Moses alive and to make this site to be continued as something which those of us who appreciate Anglo-Jewish history can come here and celebrate the legacy of Sir Moses. So that's just a brief note from one item from my collection. Thank you.
Finally, the assembly joined Rabbi Levy, the Israeli ambassador, and Professor Lachman in reciting memorial prayers for Moses Montefiore and his wife Judith at the mausoleum next to the synagogue where they are buried.
Children, so who was it?
The nephews.
The nephews.
The men are coming up. מרה, תודך אשר צפנת לידיך, פעלת לחזים בה נגד בני אדם, מה יקר חסדך אלוהים בני אדם, וצר כנפיך יחסיון.
Before travelling back to London, Rabbi Levy and Professor Lachman agreed to a brief interview. I began by asking Rabbi Levy if marking Moses Montefiore's yacht site in Ramsgate was an annual event. Right.
Yes, it's been going on now for a few years. It was started by many Hasidim who usually come around this area, Margate and Ramsgate, on holiday after Tisha B'Av. And the anniversary of Sir Moses coincides with that holiday period. So they used to come here from time to time, and it grew and grew, and more Hasidim came, and they believe that in saying prayers to Sir Moses, this will enable the Almighty to answer their prayers through his intercession.
And can I ask you, Rabbi Levy, why you decided to perhaps have the guest speaker as the ambassador of Israel today?
The ambassador of Israel had told me that he very much wanted to come here, and I didn't want to show him the building empty. I thought it should be shown with a lot of people, even though some of them may have different ideas about Israel and about the work that the Spanish and Portuguese Jews are doing. I wanted to show the unity of the Jewish people by being together and letting everybody know that it is essential that at a time when we have so many enemies, the least we can do as Jewish people is to get on with each other and respect each other.
Can you tell our viewers some of the iconic memorabilia that you have that will inspire our viewers to perhaps have more of an insight into Moses Montefiore?
Yes, well, of course, we're here. We have still his synagogue, and we have where he's buried, but it's less well known that there was a yeshiva here where he had a number of rabbis, retired rabbis from Europe, coming here who he supported for them to learn in Ramsgate, and I have the original plans of that yeshiva. He also had a magnificent house, Eastcliff Lodge, and I have a deed that he signed when he took on that lodge, signed by him, with somebody in the vicinity, guaranteeing them access to the sea through a tunnel that came from his magnificent mansion, which is behind where you're standing now, and was closely linked, obviously, to the synagogue.
And can I ask you why Moses Montefiore chose Ramsgate?
I think Rabbi Levy is probably better to qualify to answer that.
He wanted, like an Englishman has a seat, which is his, and he is the important figure in that town. He chose Ramsgate to be living in one of the best houses here, and seeing what he could do to help Ramsgate, and at the same time to worship his God. Hence he built a synagogue, he had a college here, and he did whatever he could to synthesize his love for the country together with his love for God.
I think we can be inspired by Sir Moses. Here was somebody who was an outstanding Englishman, loyal to the country in a very strong way, and yet never neglected his Jewish practice. As Rabbi Levy said, had a synagogue here near his country house, and also had an enormous love for Israel, and went obviously many times there when it was far, far more difficult for people to go than it is today.
And the ambassador touched on, obviously, Moses Montefiore would be very, very proud of Israel as it stands today. What do you think he would do about the peace situation between the Palestinians and the Jewish people there?
Very difficult to answer that, but I think he was somebody who wanted to draw people together. He gave support right across the spectrum of religion and also to non-Jews as well, and I think he was somebody who would have wanted, hopefully, Israel perhaps to be able to live at peace with its neighbours.
And Rabbi Levy, how do you think Moses Montefiore would have addressed the Israeli-Palestinian situation?
Well, I very much agree with what Professor Lachman has said. I believe that he would have wanted a way of living together. As I said in my address in the synagogue a few minutes ago, that when he went there, he was not only helping the Jews, he was helping the Muslims and he was helping the Christians, because he felt that it's only by having a united country that there was hope of success and cooperation in the future.
Professor Lachman, don't you think Moses Montefiore can be an inspiration to a religious Jew that perhaps wants to get on in business, but also perhaps wants to support and be loyal to his country of birth?
Absolutely, and of course, then at the age of 40, retired from business, having made his fortune and dedicated his life to other Jews and to helping them. So it's everything, really.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. Thank you. David Barry, reporting for Jewish Online Magazine at the seaside resort of Ramsgate, Sir Moses Montefiore's yahrzeit.